There is a war going on, a spiritual war, a war between truth and deception. Only one thing cuts through all the lies and opinions of man. It's the truth of an ancient book. It is God's word. It is God's sword.
And we will find here in the two chapters open before us blame, shame, pain, and grace. Blame, shame, pain, and grace, all right here. Let me remind you of something before we read. It is written of Abraham, and Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Counted to him for righteousness. It was counted. This man is flawed. This man is no more perfect than you or me. The patriarch wasn't chosen because he was better than all other men. He wasn't chosen because he was less bad than all other men. Although the grace of God that works in his story certainly makes him less bad. Human depravity doesn't mean we're as bad as we could be. No. With all of us here, the fact is we're never as good as we should be. None of us are as bad as we could be. We could all be worse. I think we all know that, right? But none of us are ever as good as we should be. In the journey that Abraham's on, we have seen some highs and we've seen some lows. Well, we're about to visit some more lows. It's hard to believe that a man who actually armed his servants and took on a confederacy of kings to rescue his nephew Lot. He went to war for that guy. He does not go to war for his wife. God has to. Chapter 20, verse 1. And Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country, and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. I draw your attention to the verb, took. She wasn't given, she was taken, nevertheless. Verse 3 says, but God. And I am thankful for that conjunction followed by the word God in my own story. Just as you are in yours, right? But God. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, behold, thou art but a dead man. That's a rude awakening. Hey, you, dead man. For the woman which thou hast taken, for she's a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, she's my sister. And she, even she herself, said, he's my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. God said unto him, in a dream, yea, I know that thou did this in the integrity of thy heart. For I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. Now therefore restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet. And he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. Whoa. Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told all these things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. And Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, what hast thou done unto us? And what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What sawest thou, that thou hast done this thing? And Abraham said, Because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they'll slay me for my wife's sake. And yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife. And it came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, This is the kindness which thou shalt show unto me at every place whither we shall come. Say of me, He is my brother. And Abimelech took sheep and oxen and men servants and women servants and gave them unto Abraham, and restored him Sarah his wife. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee. And unto Sarah he said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes, and to all that are with thee, and with all other. And thus she was reproved. So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Oh, all right, here we go. Ready? That's chapter 20 in a simple reading. So this is the same Abraham who did this down in Egypt. And the Lord had to intervene then, once again, despite the courage displayed on behalf of his nephew Lot. That courage is conspicuously absent here. I'm embarrassed for Abraham. I have no defense to offer for him, and I don't think the Scripture does. What he fails to do, God does. He sticks up for Sarah. Now this is something we've seen before, that a king sent and took. Back in Egypt, it was they saw Sarah's beauty and Pharaoh took. But Abraham does nothing when that happened. And that's disgraceful. I wish that the story were written different. I wish Abraham would stand up and say, you can kill me, but you will not take my wife. You'll do that over my dead body. But he does not. This is a woman that only months earlier, the Lord himself, in person, in the form of a man, pre-incarnate Christ, promised she'll have a son by Abraham at a designated time. And now she's been taken into a harem. God, he took action. That his promise will be kept despite Abraham's inaction. God. So he has an exchange with Abimelech, this Philistine king, in his sleep. And God calls him a dead man and informs him of what he does not know. You could say, Abimelech got a word of knowledge. Some knowledge that didn't come to him through any other source but God. That woman you have taken, she's a man's wife. And Abimelech's response is Lord. You'll see the word Lord in verse 4, and it's with a capital L, lowercase o-r-d. That is a translation of the title Adonai. Adonai. It's not the name of God by which he's revealed, but it is the title. And he's the Lord. Lord, the Lord. Wilt thou also slay a righteous nation? This is fresh after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And the world has heard of what happened to the cities of the plain. The world is aware of what took place. He asked the question, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Thinking that he's righteous, he's innocent, and said he not to me, she's my sister, and she, even she herself, he's my brother in the integrity of my heart. In innocency have I done this? And God said, yeah, I know. Thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart, but also I withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I not thee to touch her. This is God going, yeah, it wasn't just your innocence or integrity. So there was apparently an attempt that God had thwarted. God said, I kept you. God said to him in his dream, I'm the one that kept you. Now this is what you're going to do. You're going to restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet. Now would you pause on that thought for just a moment and observe the grace of God? Because that's gracious. You restore that man his wife, he's a prophet, he's going to pray for you. You don't? God, because you better know for sure. Thou shalt surely die, and all that are thine. You want to live, do what I said. Abimelech, he rose in the morning, and he rose in fear, and he passed that fear on to everyone. Calls Abraham. He's like, what did I do to you? What did I do to you that you would do this to me? You have done things to me that shouldn't be done. What is it you saw that made you do this thing? And Abraham's answer was, that's what I didn't see, the fear of God. I didn't see the fear of God. I thought, surely you'll slay me for my wife's sake. Well, here's a guy just about to turn 100 with a wife who is creeping up on 80. And I got to say, I really wish that I wish we had pictures. I wish I could see. She must have been some beautiful, some stunning, even at that season of life. The Lord really preserved her. Either that or, ladies, there's something to heavily marinating in olive oil or something that Sarah's got the secret to and took with her. But Abraham said, they are going to kill me. This is the kind of beauty men kill for. So we got this deal. See, she actually is my sister. She and I share a parent with the same father, different mother. Now that may disturb some of you. I'm sure it does. You go, what? That's incestuous. Well, it is now. It is now. It is here. It wasn't then. And the earliest humans, make no mistake about it, descended from two people. Somebody married their sibling. And there were no negative consequences to it. There are now. This far down the line of descent from those two people, we create problems with that kind of close mating and conceiving children. People from the same family tend to share the same genetic flaws. It becomes prohibited by God 4 centuries after Abraham, a little more than 4 centuries after Abraham, in the days of Moses, when God gives the law. God makes it abundantly clear that a close relative, that is confusion. God forbids it. God makes it a sin. But Abraham's not confessing to some sin. He's just laying out a fact that this is a half-truth. We delivered you a half-truth. She actually is, well, my sister. We have the same father. Came to pass, verse 13 says, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, this is the kindness which thou shalt show unto me. Every place whither we shall come, say of me, he's my brother. It's disgraceful. It's shameful. I don't have a defense for Abraham here. I see this as another low point. Verse 14 is mind-blowing. Abimelech gives him restitution. Kind of seems like it ought to be the other way around. But Abimelech is under the influence of the fear of God. Abimelech's like, I ain't taking any chances, man. He wants to make this as right as he can, knowing everything that is at stake. So Abraham comes out of this richer. Abimelech said, look, my land, behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee. And Then he reproved Sarah. So look, I've given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver, and behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes. So I'm just saying, she was still so beautiful, even at that season of life, that she needed a covering of the eyes. The other man needed to recognize that she's got a husband. Covering of the eyes to all that are with thee and with all other. Thus she was reproved. Abimelech reproved her as well. And then look at verse 17 is mind-blowing. Just as God said, this man is a prophet. This man will speak for me, and he will pray for you, and you'll live. Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maid servants, and they bare children. For the Lord, that is Yahweh, had closed fast all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. So God healed. However many months this was, they were all very conscious that there was no life being conceived in the house of Abimelech until this healing came. All right, so is that one of your favorite chapters of the Bible? I suspect it may not be, but you must not miss the grace. Abraham is a man under construction. That if we, as the Apostle Paul says in 2 Timothy, if we are faithless, he abideth faithful still. He cannot deny himself. God has made promises to Abraham, and he's not going to revoke them. God intervenes. God stands up for Sarah when Abraham will not, or does not. It's not a high point, you guys. It's a low point. Now, chapter 21. Go there with me. Chapter 21 begins at verse 1. And the Lord, that's Yahweh, visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare unto him, Isaac. Abraham circumcised his son, Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking, scoffing. She saw contempt for the new kid. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. God said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight, because of the lad, because of thy bondwoman, in all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. For in Isaac shall thy seed be called. And also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and took bread and a bottle of water, and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, and the child, and sent her away, and she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. And she went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bow shot. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. God heard the voice of the lad. The angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad drink, and God was with the lad, and he grew. And he dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran. His mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. That's where we'll stop reading today. Save the last portion of the chapter for our next study. Consider verse 1 of chapter 21. And the Lord visited Sarah as he said. The Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. God keeps his promises. For she conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. So God kept his promise, and he kept it on time. That son came, that son of promise. Abraham called the name of his son, the very name that God had chosen, Isaac, which means laughter. We have the record here in this chapter of two significant events in Isaac's life. First, his circumcision, 8 days after he was born, as God commanded. Abraham was obedient to God, gave the symbol of the covenant that he and his people have with God. He did it as God commanded, and he did it when God commanded. He was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born, 100. And Sarah is the one in verse 6 that said, God hath made me to laugh. You remember when that happened first, back in chapter 18. She was inside the tent, outside the tent. God, in the form of a man, the Son of God, exchanged communications with Abraham about this son of promise, and Sarah suppressed a laugh. And the Lord, who hears everything, said, Why did Sarah laugh? And Sarah, remember, she was inside the tent, just that wall of fabric. She said, I did not laugh, which was technically true. She didn't laugh out loud, but she laughed on the inside. And the Lord said, But you did laugh. This is the Lord saying, I want to give you something to laugh about. And he did. And Sarah, her remark, God, Elohim hath made me laugh, and everybody's going to laugh with me. That preposition is kind of a big deal, right? With. The whole world's not laughing at her. Maybe there was a time when they laughed at her for her barrenness, but now the whole world will laugh with me. And to this day, the whole world shares the joy of what God did. She's like, who would have said? Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would give children sons, for I born him a son in his old age? So then the next event, after the 8th day of his life, and he was circumcised, he was weaned. They had a celebration for that, a great feast, the same day that Isaac was weaned, the day that Isaac made the transition from breast milk to solid food. Big landmark, big celebration, big feast. Now, bearing in mind that Ishmael came into this world 13 years before Isaac. He's 13 years older. And there's a gap of 13 years between them. So he's at least 13. The question becomes one of how old was Isaac when he was weaned? Let's just assume, reasonable numbers, that he was 3 or 4, but probably 3. That makes Ishmael now 16. So at the feast, celebrating this new kid and his being weaned, Sarah witnessed the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, Ishmael. She witnessed contempt. And Sarah was not playing around when she came to Abraham with a command. Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even Isaac. Now, surely you guys all remember how that all came about. right? It was chapter 16, and it was Sarah's suggestion, take my maidservant Hagar, impregnate her. She could be a surrogate mother. Maybe that's how God wants to do this thing. And Abraham, on that occasion, hearkened to the voice of his wife. He blew it. He hearkened to the voice of his wife. He did not hear the heart of his wife. I said then, I'll say now. Men, husbands, or those who will be husbands, listen, you cannot hearken to the voice of your wife all the time. You got to instead hearken to the heart of your wife. What is she actually saying? She's probably actually saying to Abraham, come on, just tell me you don't think I'm the problem. Tell me you don't think there's another way. A wife may say, I hate you. Now, she might mean that. But most of the time, it's actually the wife saying, I don't feel loved by you. I wish you loved me. Because you don't, I hate you. Is that crazy or what? But it's still true. I don't know if anybody in this room has ever said that. But I know it is said. A woman will say things she doesn't mean, like the one sentence that is always a lie. I just hope you're happy now. A woman will say such things and not mean that. It's important that a wife has a husband who, as the Apostle Peter, the married apostle wrote in 1 Peter chapter 3, you got to live insightfully. Husband, you need to live with your wife according to knowledge. You got to live insightfully. You got to know what she means. There are times when a man as a husband must hearken to the heart of the woman, not just the voice. Abraham hearkened to her voice, and Ishmael, he comes into the world. Poor Hagar, poor Ishmael. They're not making choices. Other people are making choices that have sent their life in various directions. And now, the same woman who had said, take my maid servant, impregnate her, now says, cast him out of here, I want him gone. There's a whole sermon to be preached on this, cast out the bondwoman. You'll find it in Galatians chapter 4. The Apostle Paul compares Ishmael to the works of the flesh. And there are things that we got to cast out. Brothers, there are things, sisters, there are things that we got to cast off, and there are things that we got to put on. In the New Testament, in the epistles, we're told cast off this, put on this. And there are things to be cast out. Verse 11, look at verse 11, because this is a book that does not exaggerate or overstate anything. The thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. Very grievous in Abraham's sight. It was distressing. Another translation. This was heartbreaking. The position that Abraham finds himself in. Sarah wants him gone. Abraham loves Ishmael. He loves him. He's his son. But now his true wife says, I want this, your legitimate son, gone. And his mother. Abraham is in this awful place, but God steps in verse 12. God said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, because of thy bondwoman. And all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. For in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Also the son of the bondwoman, I'll make a nation because he is thy seed. I have a plan for him. But the son of promise, the one that I'm going to count is your son that you had by your wife. So God tells him, let it not be grievous. Just, you need to do, look at the words, you need to hearken unto her voice, Sarah's voice. So brothers, men, married men, there's a time where if you hearken to the voice of your wife, you're going to be in trouble. And there's a time that if you don't hearken to the voice of your wife, you're going to be in trouble. You get that? So what is the guy supposed to do? Well, you better have God involved in your story, as Abraham did, and listen to him. You better have God. You go and pray to the Lord and go, Lord, is this one of those times when I'm supposed to hear her heart? Because I'm not. Help me out here. Or is this one of those times I'm supposed to hear exactly what she's saying? You need to be led by the Holy Spirit of God, and you can be. There are things I don't know, and there are things I don't understand. I got to tell you, as I come to what we read next in verse 14, I have questions. I'm sure you do. How could you, Abraham? I can get God saying, give him up, send him away. I can get that. I don't have a problem understanding that. I can understand God saying that's not your legitimate son. It's not. I'll be his father. But he's not the son of promise. I can understand God saying send him away. What I cannot understand, he just sends them away broke. He sends them away with a skin of water and bread. He took bread and a bottle of water. Just the amount that you could put on his shoulder. He's rich. He's rich. He could have sent them away with pack mules, camels. He could have sent them away with... There are things I admit to you I do not understand. And I also have to admit to you, maybe some of you can relate, that I identify with Ishmael. Some of you might have, like me, experienced being cast away by your father. I was, and I still remember the pain. I don't live in that pain, but I remember it well. I'm grateful for the memory. Maybe some of you had your dad decide that he could not stay with your mother, and he wouldn't stay together. They wouldn't stay together even for your sake. And your whole world was destroyed, torn into pieces as he left. And they acted like, oh, you'll get over it, you guys. You know, we'll still be here in your life. It's a hard thing for a kid to process, and it makes you ask questions like, what's wrong with me? It will. You'll find yourself, if you haven't, thinking, man, I must not be much of a kid. Not much of a son. Yesterday in preparation, my daughter sent me actually she and John both, they came upon this country song and they both separately sent it to me. It's a great song, profound song. I can't remember the artist, but the title of the song, I remember it, especially because it used a double negative. Daddy Don't Drink No More. And Daddy Don't Drink No More is a sweet song, a father expressing to a son. It wasn't a 12-step program, it wasn't hitting rock bottom, it wasn't any of those things. It was just the arrival of this son into the world. That this father determined, I don't want to be that man. I don't want to be that way. Because of the son arriving. And even then, as an old man, I read those lyrics, and I thought, man, I'm glad I didn't hear this when I was a kid. That would have hurt me worse. Because my dad was not so affected by my arrival into the world, or by any of the other 6 that I know of that he conceived. My arrival didn't bring him to remorse or repentance or recognizing a need to change or wanting to, be the kind of man whose boots I'd want to step into, which is what the song said. I processed it for a long time in my childhood. I guess I relate more to Ishmael. How do people make these choices? How do adults make these choices and send us kids down these roads? But God. So I can't defend Abraham's actions. I don't know anything cultural. I don't know anything about the institution of slavery and how it worked in Abraham's day. I can't give you information that I don't have. I find no explanation, so I won't offer any. I have no defense for him. I got all the same questions you have. Why didn't you set them up somewhere? Why didn't you, you're going to disown him? You're going to make sure he's not an heir? Do you have to do it that way? I don't know, man. I see it as a low point for Abraham. He does not impress me here at all. Yet I do acknowledge that he, despite the pain, did what God told him to. God told him, do what your wife said. So we find them wandering. She's wandering. She doesn't even know where she's going. The wilderness of Beersheba, the water in the bottle is spent. Both of them are now in that semi-desert or actual desert. Now, experience the dehydration death, and it doesn't take long. King James Version does a terrible job in translation here. Verse 15 refers to Ishmael as a child. You get the impression she cast the child under one of the shrubs. She laid him in the shade. He clearly was overcome by dehydration before her. But he's a teen, not a child. He is a youth, literally translated. And she put some distance between her and him because her heart was, I don't want to see him die. And from there she cries. She sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. That's what verse 16 says. She wept. She cries. But there's not any indication that she prayed. This is the same girl whom the Lord visited in person. Last time she ran away, he met her, comforted her, told her to go back and submit to your mistress. She did. Now the same Lord calls to her from heaven. It's incredibly gracious to me. She's not calling to him, she's crying. She just cries, and she's going to cry herself to death when the Lord interrupts her cry with his words. And his words were because of Ishmael's words. Look at verse 17. God heard the voice of the lad. God heard Ishmael. Now this is amazing to me that despite the confusion of a very, spiritual father who's got this thing with God, and his being sent away, despite all of the questions that have to be provoked in Ishmael's heart and his mind, he's talking to God. God heard the voice of the lad. And the angel of God called to Hagar, which is cool, that God hears the voice of the lad and tells his mother. That God heard the voice of the lad and tells the lad's mother, I've heard his voice, I know where he is. Look at verse 18. No, actually, verse 17, second half. The angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, what's wrong? Hagar. He has her name, he knows her. What's wrong, Hagar? Don't be afraid, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Do you understand? If any of you in this room are Hagar, choices, other people's choices, some man's choice, put you where you ended up. And you ended up where she was, desperate and afraid and crying. Can you hear the Lord speak to you by name? Because he will speak. And he spoke to her and he said, I've heard the voice of the lad where he is. I've heard his voice. What a comfort to her heart to hear that Ishmael is talking to God. God says, I've heard his voice. He's talking to me. I know where he is. I'm telling you, that God hears your voice. He knows your pain. He knows who to blame. He knows where you are. His words to Hagar, to the mother, arise, lift up the lad and hold him in your hand. I can't. That paints, that English translation paints a picture that she's got a baby to go pull out from under the bush. No, she's got a young man whose head she can lift to her lap and hydrate him. God said, I will make him a great nation. I got plans for this man. I'm going to make him a nation. Verse 19 says, God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. It was there all along. She's all the time weeping and sure this is the end. And it was there, and that's not unusual for us. We miss a lot of things. if God does not open our eyes. So we ought to be asking God, open our eyes a lot, you guys. We should be praying constantly, Lord, open my eyes because I'll miss things. The Lord opened her eyes and she saw well. She filled the bottle with water and she gave it to the lad to drink. She was able to do what the Lord said and lift him up in her hands and hydrate him. And the statement in verse 20 must not be missed. And God was with the lad. And he grew. He dwelt in the wilderness and he became an archer. Do you guys understand? Do you understand? He became a sniper. At Ishmael, he became a shooter. Now, the statement that he became an archer doesn't just mean he started making little bows and shooting them. No, it means this became his identity. Do you understand that? He became this. That means we're talking about a champion. We're talking about somebody who is known for his skill. He dwelt in the wilderness of Paran with his mother, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. His Egyptian mother took him a wife out of Egypt. His story goes on, but it goes on separate from Abraham. Now again, we have before us in these two chapters pain, shame, blame. We also have the grace of God. Blessing and working in what you would have to identify as way less than ideal circumstances. Do not think for a minute that God needs the ideal in order to get anything good to happen in your life. God is able to cause all things to work together for the good of those who love him and are called. Were you affected by the choices of others? Ishmael was. But God was with him. You don't have to be a victim of other people's choices. I visited a memory myself the other day when my sister Carmen had been going through my mother's. It's been a year since Mom went to be with the Lord. Carmen's still going through some things. She found a picture of a 6-year-old me holding a baby, looking at this baby. That baby was my half-brother. See, my father had left us. It was the most traumatic thing that had happened to me up to that point, at 6. The announcement that he's gone, he ain't coming back. He ain't just gone for work with Sargent Corporation. He's not just gone off, running heavy equipment, making money. He is gone. He's not coming back. He's got a new wife. He remarried, and he has a new son. I remember well the pain of that news. And then my dad, he comes to get me, takes me for a weekend visit. And it was in that weekend visit that he made this introduction to me, and I'm holding this, as I was told to hold him. And I'm looking at this little bundle. I can see in the picture all of my cogs and wheels spinning, smoking. I'm trying to process all of this. How does this make sense? I can tell you that God has used all of that for good. Grateful that I and you as a church family have had a part to play in the restoration of so many families. We've had a part to play in the sobriety of others, so many who were just like my dad. I wish my young dad could have come to CRD, heard the gospel, shown another way. I wish for that. But there's a sense in which I see him in every one of these guys, and the ladies that pass through. Jeanette showed me a picture. She just came back from a pastor's wives conference, and a whole bunch of those pastors' wives all jumped in a photo with her, a big giant group photo of a whole bunch of spiritual daughters who are in ministry with their husband. They all represent not just a whole bunch of spiritual grandchildren, but way beyond that, because their lives are affecting, they're all in ministry. They're all doing the same thing. I can recognize that pain of my childhood, which I'll tell you again, the pain of my childhood is not as great as the pain that my sisters and my mother experienced because they're girls. Or the pain of Jeanette's childhood, for her parents were drunk Creoles that tried to kill each other nightly. And coming out of all the dysfunction that our two lives came out of and marrying, the grace of God worked in our story. These were actually among my last expressions last night, texting with my daughter, the miracle that our family is, and the miracle that her mother is, and our marriage is. We never should have made it, statistically speaking. But God, you guys understand that? But God thing? What the Lord has done, what the Lord is doing, part of what he's doing and part of what he has done is he has used the pain of a boy who in 1969 sat trying to process holding a little baby. Let me give you one quote and leave you with it because it's time to go, if I may. It's the quotable C.S. Lewis. Let's talk about Abraham for a second before we end this. Man, that guy's a mix, isn't he? He's truly a mixture of, he's in process. The defining moment of his life is actually in the next chapter. The thing that Abraham's going to be known for forever is in chapter 22. What blows my mind is that chapter 22 comes after chapter 20 and 21. Does that make sense? I'm amazed that chapter 22 happens after chapter 20 and 21. Well, maybe you and I, sitting here, have some things in common with Ishmael. We have some things in common with Hagar. Maybe you identify most with Sarah, and you're on her side. But every single one of us have this in common with Abraham. We are not perfect, and we have to have righteousness credited to us. We have to have it counted. This quote, C.S. Lewis said, "There is someone I love, even though I don't approve of what he does. And there is someone I accept, though some of his thoughts and actions revolt me. There's someone I forgive, though he hurts the people that I love the most. That person," he writes, "is me." God's grace at work in all of our lives. His plan for us is not dependent upon our performance, not dependent even so much upon our cooperation with him, though we certainly should cooperate with him. God's grace is at work in all of our lives. And if it wasn't for him, we'd all be doomed. Christian philosopher from India, Vishal Mangalwadi, includes in his testimony, in his great work, The Book That Made Your World. I'd recommend it, every one of you, read it, but some have, the rest of you are lazy. You can get the audio book and do it in drive time. Let me repeat it. The Book That Made Your World. If you do read the book, you'll actually hear Vishal Mangalwadi testify that when curiosity brought him to the scriptures, and he was working his way through, when he read it, it struck him going through these kind of stories, like Abraham's story. It struck him, and he said, wow, this is written as if it really actually happened. In other words, the Jewish scribes, even Moses, the author, despite the high regard they have for the patriarch Abraham, they don't gloss over his problems. They don't airbrush or Photoshop the picture we have of Abraham. And it struck Vishal Mangalwadi that the only good guy in the whole book, that is the only one who's always the hero and always right, is God. And all the rest of us, we're the ones who are supposed to respond to his goodness and his heroism in our story. Come on, let's stand together and we'll close with a prayer. Two chapters, ladies and gentlemen. 2 chapters on a Sunday morning. When you run into your other friends that go to church, just ask them, how many chapters you guys cover on Sunday?
Hey, thanks for listening. We pray that the Word of God will speak to your heart as you meditate on it. If we can help you grow, or if you have any questions, you can visit us at our website at ccbangor.org. Give us a phone call at area code 207-991-9555, or you can shoot us an email at office@ccbangor.org. On behalf of Pastor Ken and all of us here at Calvary Chapel Central Maine, we wish you grace and peace.